In January 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation ending slavery in all the Confederate states that had issued articles of secession from the Union as a tactic to win the United States Civil War. Contrary to popular belief in 1863, President Lincoln did not care about freeing blacks from American bondage and only issued the proclamation as a strategy to save the Union. Indeed, in an August 22, 1862 letter to Horace Greeley on the topic of slavery, Lincoln stated that, quote, "The sooner the national authority can be restored, the nearer the Union will be to the Union as it was. If there be those that would not save the Union unless they at the same time destroy slavery, I would not agree with them. My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." Unquote. President Lincoln's scheme was to only free those enslaved Africans in the South and to get black men to join and fight with the Union armies, while permitting other slaveholding states who had not joined with the Confederate seceding states to maintain their enslavement of African people. While Abraham Lincoln pushed for the emancipation of Southern blacks, many Africans in northern states also advocated for black voting rights alongside the end of slavery for all American blacks. In an 1863 speech, Frederick Douglass argued that one of the best ways to safeguard a Union victory in the Civil War would be to give the formerly enslaved the right to vote, since blacks would then become the government's best protector against the traitors and descendants of those traitors, who will inherit the hate, the bitter revenge, which shall crystallize all over the South and seek to circumvent the government that they could not throw off. In 1864, 144 black delegates from 18 states in the Union attended the National Convention of Colored Men in Syracuse, New York. The convention was led by Frederick Douglass, Reverend Henry H. Garnett, and William Wells Brown. Many of the delegates pointed out that while President Lincoln was asking black men to join the Union Army, why did the country believe that black men were, quote, good enough to use the bullets, but not good enough to use the ballots, unquote. In February 1865, Dr. Martin R. Delany traveled to Washington, D.C. to have an interview with President Abraham Lincoln about the possibility of integrating a full army of some 40,000 black soldiers, led and controlled by black commissioned officers, to help win the Civil War and ensure that black soldiers who were becoming disillusioned with the prejudice of white officers would not desert from the Union cause. Educated and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Martin R. Delany was a well-known abolitionist, author, editor of the Mystery newspaper, co-founder of the North Star with Frederick Douglass, and many believed was the father of black nationalism. On February 8th, Dr. Delany met with Abraham Lincoln at the White House, where Delany requested President Lincoln enforce his recommendation. Lincoln told Delany that this idea was exactly what he had in mind when he had issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but that no one had ever made this proposal. Lincoln asked Delany if he would take a position as a Union officer, and then wrote a note to the Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, arranging a further interview. 19 days later, Dr. Martin R. Delany was commissioned as the U.S. Army's first black field officer in the Civil War. In 1867, after the end of the Civil War, black male suffrage took a drastic leap forward. Fresh off victories in midterm statewide elections, Republicans in Congress overrode then-President Andrew Johnson's veto power to pass a series of Reconstruction Acts. The first act, approved in March 1867, required former Confederate states to form new governments that enfranchised, quote, all male citizens 21 years old and upward of whatever race, color, or previous condition, unquote, before that state could be readmitted into the Union. Under these new laws, and with the backing of the United States military, black men in the formerly slave-holding states could vote and run for government positions. Tens of thousands did. Black voting at the state levels created the nation's first biracial state government. They also laid the foundation for the first black representatives in the U.S. Congress. However, and ironically, the main political hurdle that black male suffrage had to overcome was winning voting approval in the northern and western states. Before 1867, in election after election, white men in the North and West had made it clear that while they had no problem with approving voting rights for blacks in the South, they had little interest in adding black men to the voting rolls in the so-called liberal states. This dilemma led to a voting showdown in the 1868 presidential election, fearful that the North would reject their party's approach to Reconstruction. The Republican Party nominated Union General Ulysses S. Grant, a candidate that they believed would garner broad appeal throughout the North and West. On the other hand, and after much debate, the Democrats selected Horatio Seymour, the then governor of New York, who would later run on a platform of no Negro equality and constitutional voting amendment no. General Grant narrowly won the 1868 presidential election, and Republicans were cheerful to see that newly enfranchised blacks throughout the South had come out to vote and support Grant's election. Republicans then realized that possibly giving black men the right to vote nationally, they hoped, would secure their party's political future. In 1869, Congress passed the 15th Amendment, and on February 3, 1870, Congress ratified the amendment granting black men the right to vote.